So I told Brandy that before we came here today that he could have a little more the extra time, not really knowing like the discussion I was going to listen to today. I have to tell you that I'm really happy to hear that this type of discussion is happening, and a lot of the comments that I heard today, it's deja vu for me. Like, these are the same types of conversations that I heard literally at similar types of tables 5-6 years ago when we were working in France. And the questions that are being asked, it's the same thing. And so, so today I wish I knew that I was coming into that. There would have been a little bit different, but it's great because I think a lot of the presentation is going to resonate, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. So, I feel like maybe for the first time in Toronto, I'm actually speaking at an event where the people are going to really understand what I'm saying. So, my name is Livio Nichilo. I'm with Internet Energy Solutions. I'm just going to give you a brief little look of who we are and where we come from. What I want to do is, though, touch on a little bit of an international perspective. I'm lucky enough through our group that's in France and in China to have this international perspective on what's happening when we talk about climate change, mitigation, adaptation, these types of on a municipal level. I want to talk about what we have, the creation of Encompass, and where the need that I saw for it. And finally, also discuss a little bit about Harbourfront Centre and maybe some of those key performance indicators, some of those things that happen there that really make it special that I think you guys are going to relate to a lot. So quickly, Internet Energy Solutions Canada, we're a new office in Toronto. We started in Toronto about 3 years ago. Originally, of course, we started off in France. We have our organization also in Beijing in China. 3 very completely different jurisdictions to work in, but we're a good group that's pretty tight, so we speak to each other, daily, weekly basis, and we get a really good perspective on what's happening around the world, and there's a lot of insights that we can bring to each other's projects that way. We have 3 main core capacities that I would say that we have. We are engineers, most of us at the base. Just to give you a little bit of the background, the core of Internet Energy Solutions is a bunch of engineers from Queen's University that graduated. We went around the world and did work in other places and find our way back together again. So we do take care of a lot of energy conservation projects, in particular in Ontario, multi-residential. We do a lot of work in commercial. Renewables, of course, starting off in Europe 6 years ago, there was renewables was very important for any engineering group to work with when you're talking about building systems. So naturally we got involved with that. But I would say that the third and the one I'm going to talk to about mostly here, and what I like to say is, brings everything together in the core capacity is our greenhouse gas emission study and reduction plan. And this part came from our client telling us, it's great what I'm doing for my building, it's great that I'm adding renewables, but for me, this isn't everything. What about my waste? What about my transportation? What about what I'm purchasing? All of these other points are very important to us to understand too. And this came from our client. And when those questions started to come up, we started to look for solutions. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we saw. So let's get the international perspective. I'm going to touch on France and China quickly so you see where this is coming from in terms of our approach. In France, what we have right now for the European, and this is for the whole continent of Europe, there's the 3x20 objective. And the 3x20 of objective is 20% GHG reduction, 20% conservation in energy, 20% renewable energy. That's every country. So it doesn't matter if they're a cold country, doesn't matter if they're a hot country. Everyone's under this rule. And as a group in the European Union, basically these are being met. The one that's the most difficult right now for them is the 20% conservation of energy. But the other 2 are actually, they're going to exceed them. And they're actually talking about calling it 3x30 objectives. So this is what's happening there. This is where they're moving. In France specifically, what I can tell you is that in 2009, the French government, this is national. So I understand in Canada a little bit different, right? And what I mean is that a lot of this stuff is provincially driven. In Europe, you have to understand it's almost like each country is a province. That's the correlation you can make. The joke too you can make, but that's really what it's about. So the French government basically came out with what you would call kind of like a regulation saying that for local authorities, being yourself, municipalities, that climate change is your first priority. Okay, and you might think this is crazy. How does this become their first priority? But you have to think about who France is. France is very dependent on their climate. I would say out of all the countries I've lived or visited, they're probably the most dependent. They very much require the climate for what they grow, the crops that they make, for the different types of animals that they have, and they're very much a tourist area. People come there for tourism. So France is very heavy and dependent on their climate. For them, climate change is a risk that is humongous, and they recognize that, and that's why they can come up with something like this. And the second part of it that started in 2010 was basically them saying that any a municipality of over 50,000 inhabitants by the end of this year has to have a climate energy plan. And the climate energy plan, it's not the same for what we see happening in Ontario, which we're going to discuss, and you guys even touched on it today, but it does have the same kind of resemblance to it. And the difference being between what's happening here in Ontario and what's happening in France is that personally coming from from both and seeing both, is they've done a much better job in preparing people to actually react and work with this. And we'll talk a little bit about this. They created the ADEM, which is the agency that Randy spoke briefly about, and they came up with what is called the Territorial Sustainability Development Project. And their objective is to improve the quality of life in a municipality. Very broad topic. It includes all of the things that you guys are dealing with, economic issues, local jobs. It deals with people's soft transportation needs. It deals with cultural issues. It deals with all of these things, and that's what they were mandated to do. But also part under there is dealing with climate change and adaptation. And as part of this agency, their goal was to facilitate and make sure that municipalities could act on those two regulations. So that meant providing the best practices and meant providing the tools that they needed to work on this, okay? And what I'm going to speak to you about today in particular is about the Bilan Carbone, which was specifically related to the climate change part of that, and the tool that they built to address climate change, okay? So a couple of the lessons learned. ADEM has been doing this for now about 8 years. And before that, the tool kind of originated out of the universities in Paris 10 years before that. So a lot of history behind it, and a lot of work has been done. But some key lessons learned from when ADEM rolled out these programs with the municipalities. One is that in order to have GHG policy work inside of their country, you have to give the opportunity with no barriers for people to participate. That was essential. You put up a barrier, it's going to take you an extra 10 years, basically. Life cycle and holistic approach limits leakage. Now, this is one that I think that, in my sense, North America has the most difficult to deal with. Life cycle means not just looking at what comes out of the tailpipe. Life cycle means to understand the steps that got that tailpipe even there. And the key to that is, first of all, is an appreciation for it. And second of all, is that we limit the leakage that might be happening, where we might be limiting our emissions that come out of the tailpipe, but we might be forcing it on something else. Okay? And so it's very important for them that it's a life cycle approach. The third one, of course, we talked about the limiting barriers, the tools and knowledge. That's where them came in. Ensuring transparency. Things have to be available for anybody to see when they need to see it. Providing a strong network of support. What I can tell you is that from these initiatives, there was a whole new industry that grew up in France, where you had professionals working on this work with municipalities, for municipalities. So a whole new profession arose in France as a result of it. That meant jobs, that meant innovation, and that was the result of it. And the last one was developing a common language. What they were afraid of is that you have, like you guys seem to be talking about today, is each municipal doing their own thing, each region doing their own thing, and when they come to talk, they're on a different page, and it makes the conversation very difficult. And actually, if anything, it starts to make a little bit of friction because one wants to support theirs, the other one wants to support theirs. So these are the key lessons learned when them did their projects and worked towards the goals the tools and goals that they have. Quickly, China, a different story there, right? France, it's inclusive, it's figuring out what's needed, bringing everyone to the table, you know. In China, we're seeing a different thing happen, right? In China, our team members there, what they're seeing is the 12th five-year plan came out last year. Basically, the government says, this is the rules, this is what we need to get done, this is who's going to do it. It's black and white like that. Basically, they, in their five-year plan, China has, if you look at the main themes in their five-year plan, sustainability is written all over it, okay? Transportation is a key thing for them, reductions in GHG emissions, energy conservation, and it's different there, where those are main themes, that's their direction. It's not about bringing together everyone to agree on it. That's the direction. And in a sense, what they do is almost like they do pilot projects for each thing. And if the pilot projects are a success or they make them a success, then it gets rolled out to everyone. So what I can tell you is that there's 5 provinces and 8 cities specifically in China that will be developing low carbon regions. Okay, and we're part of some of the projects that are happening in Tianjin and Wuhan. So Wuhan, if you look at, we have talked about scale in China. Wuhan is a city almost the size of Canada in terms of population. So this is what they're working on over there. Okay. So our office in Toronto, again, some Queen's engineers. We always wanted to come back to Canada. We had to wait for the right time, though. Before 3 years ago, I think we would have been wasting our time. So, but certain things happened, and we thought it was time. And so we came to Toronto. In Ontario, we quickly identified a couple needs. Okay. Knowing what we had done in France and what we had seen in France in particular, we identified some needs. One of them is that there's an absence of national strategy. It's provincial run. Basically, it's municipalities that are receiving some direction from the provinces, and the municipalities basically taking care of these objectives themselves. The current provincial new energy conservation demand management plan, which you guys spoke of, this is probably the first regulation that really looks at addressing the needs to quantify, the needs to report, and the needs to make things transparent. So now the reality in terms of a regulation is there. Now, again, the regulation isn't the same like we saw in France. It's not life cycle based. It's not talking about waste. It's not talking about transportation. It's really just based on how much gas and things, electricity you use. But it's a start, and it definitely is starting to make people ask the questions, which is perfect. The next is voluntary action occurring. So we see a lot of voluntary action occurring within municipalities. You guys are evidence of that, but also we see it within corporations. And the next is methodologies based on life cycle. We did not see any of this here. Very little based on life cycle approach. It's all, like I said, how much gas do you put in, how many liters, or what's your kilowatt hours usage, and that's it. The conversion's done, and that's your emission. but that's not the emissions, and that's not the impact you have, and most of all, that's not the opportunity you have. Okay, and then the last one here is understanding climate change policy and the different markets. So we saw that these needs were here. We went to Encompass, and okay, so I gotta get rushed here, but there's too much here. So we looked to create Encompass. Just to tell you briefly, we got collaboration from NRC. They knew what we were doing. We spent 2 years doing research, a lot of work. We created a tool. We created short training for this, and we looked to Harbourfront Centre to be the example of how you implement this. Okay.
I mean, Encompass is essentially a new iteration of the Bilan Carbone tool that was used in France. It was with the partnership with the government of France that Encompass helped draw to.
At the end of the day, we want this to get out because we know the impact that this can have, and if it's done properly, it can be like what happened in France, where it created industries. It created action. It created people to take their baselines. Okay, and so we did that work. We had partners, of course, to help us to get to this stage, but we spent basically the last 2.5 years doing this work and getting it ready. So Harbourfront Centre, perfect example for it. Like Randy explained to you, it's almost like a city within the city. So it was natural for us to use this as a case study. We started on, the overall kind of methodology, and it was nice that I heard today the most daunting task that everyone sees right in front of them is the data collection. And, I think this is I don't know where the roadblock comes from, but I think what we need to understand is that you don't need to have it perfect the first time around, right? What's important is that you get started on the data collection so you understand where information lacks. And that's what happened at Harbourfront Centre. The first year, there was information lacking. So what we did is we set up the processes to make sure we collect that data. And that's really the crux of the work in that data collection. Once that's set up, year after year, it's like turn piecemeal. This stuff comes out. You have numbers coming to you. You can do your analysis. And again, that's what Encompass, and we talked about historically what they're going to be releasing in terms of like doing the calculator and stuff like that. And that's great. It's great to have everyone on. The key thing that we found with them is that it's one thing to be able to do a calculator. It's another thing to be able to take that information, do analysis, and put it in front of decision makers so that they understand their risk in not doing this or in choosing this project over another project. And that's what we wanted to do with Encompass also, is not just have a calculator, but make sure that people have analysis ways to look at policies, to look at, this initiative or another initiative. Okay? So this is now what you look at Harbourfront. We did 2009, 10, 11 is coming very soon. Their fiscal year ends at March. We need the fiscal year because basically we take their accounting records, have their purchases. The purchases are based into categories that we can now use with our emission factors to allow us to understand the impact from their purchases. Okay, so we need March to pass the end of March to pass before we can do 2011. But this is what happened. And every year now that it's set up, it's getting better. There's other scopes that we're adding that wasn't there before, but it's getting better and better every year. Key thing I wanted to touch on today is that now we have this information, we have this analysis, we have this data. What do we do with it? Every year, this works on an annual basis at Harbourfront Centre because it fits within what, how they do things there. But on an annual basis, what we look to do is to complete these initiatives that we come up with. And, the initiatives come up from ourselves, Randy, Harbourfront Centre, the other stakeholders that they have. We look to complete projects that basically complete three main objectives. One, engaging stakeholders. One or more. They can do one or more. One, engaging stakeholders. Another one is maybe impactful on their GHG reductions, but not so visible or interesting. So it's almost like their housekeeping. And the third one is demonstrations and innovation. Okay? So those are the three criteria we look to hit. With each of our projects got to be able to fit within one or more of those categories. The next one is each initiative. You can see we come up with a report, and each report shows the initiative, how it affects financially, environmentally, and socially. Okay? And that's the basis of making the decisions. They can look at each of those reports, one initiative over another, and make a decision. It's not just finances, it's also the social, and it's also the environmental part, which comes from the outputs of doing all this work, right? The financial gains Randy talked about, we created, and that's an agreement that we made, of course, with the people that manage and run Harbourfront Centre, but basically what we gain from doing this work stays within this group and allows us to do more work with it. And that's an important part of it. But once you have this methodology, once you have this cycle running, it's like anything else. At the end of the year, they just approve budgets, right? That's it. This is just another one. They go through the decisions, make their budget, and it's done. And finally, of course, each project success has brought on momentum for organizational change. So basically, each time we're making a success, more people are getting involved, more people are coming to me and saying, hey, Livio, I have this project I need to do. I'm thinking of doing it this way. And that's it. That's how the collaboration starts to happen. That's how I start to understand what's happening on the site. That's how I start to be able to give a voice of maybe where they should go to look for opportunity to build on it. Because the collaboration is a key point to making it a success. Because your municipality, things are happening every day. There's projects on the go. There's people already developing other initiatives. The key thing is to bring them to the table to say, how does my initiative relate to what's happening overall? And to ask those questions. And because the information's there, it's transparent, we can do that conversation. Okay, I can't get into the projects. I wish I could, but there's. So what's the future plan? Now that we got things ready, so it fixed up the website and with the tools put together, everything. We got the training course already. We want to get this out to people. Okay, it's specific to Ontario. You didn't create a tool that can be used everywhere. No, that's not how it works. It's a tool for Toronto, for Ontario. It's a tool that we build also for Quebec and BC because of the Western Climate Initiative partners. And we want to get it out to people. We want to get it out to people in municipalities that want to use it. We want to get it to people in organizations that want to use it, other consultants that want to start doing this work. For us, it's a great tool for us to use for our projects, but we want it to get out to as many people as possible. And so that's kind of our objective moving forward with it. Okay? Sorry. I know my
It's not your fault. No, that's not my fault. Okay, questions, comments. Yeah, we have FCM on the line. Yeah. So they'll be going to be there. She's just waiting for us. Okay. Yeah. So is there any discussion, please? A lot of information.
Yeah, it's
and very inspiring information. You've done some amazing work. So, do you think it's point? I was just wondering if maybe we'll touch base and continue chatting and stuff, but I thought it might be really good to kind of understand where, when it comes to data collection, with our April meeting being on that theme, to kind of understand where you encountered problems, how you overcame them, because I think that's one of the things that all of these municipalities are struggling with is the data collection.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the main roadblock that you need to get through, and what we saw in France, is that the first time you do it doesn't need to be perfect. That's really what you need to understand. It is going to get much better the second time and the third time, especially for a municipality.
Well, but if I could add something, I think what really benefited us having internet at the table in this situation was that they had experience to learn from having gone through this process with other municipalities and organizations, such that when we encountered gaps in data, it was easier for them to sort of prioritize where we should spend a lot of time trying to extrapolate or trying to acquire additional data points, and where we could rely on something that was less accurate because it wasn't going to be influential in year one. For example, with our visitor transportation, it was clear from the onset that it was going to be the largest contributor to our overall carbon footprint. So we had 95%. But the reality is in year one, we had a very sort of loose and rough data point from which we could understand that 95%. We weren't going to undertake any initiatives to start impacting that immediately on a zero budget. There wasn't an ROI to it. We didn't know how to do that. We have since. But for the first year, we just decided, this is by far the largest chunk. We could dive into more data and find different ways to collect it, start surveying people and so forth, and trying to get more and more accuracy, but it really wouldn't have served a great function in year one. And it was something that we're now focused on for later years. So having that perspective and being able to,
a couple of years later, the survey went out, right? Because we knew we needed this information. Surveys are done at Harbourfront Centre to understand what people want to see there. And now these became part of the question. So now we had that data, right? So it's really, about not just seeing, and you know what? It comes with having confidence that if you dive into it, that eventually you can swim out of it, and I know that's part of it. But really, for municipalities, it really is about that. It's not to see that roadblock, understand that it's about getting into it, and you'll figure it out. It's not the I guess the monster that everyone wants to be.
Yeah. So Peel is very stagnant.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's come up in conversations with the inventory and costing and whatnot. Cost of the action. Just wonder
exactly.
It's perfect if you guys provide that.
Well, that's exactly the point. Like I said that with what was going to come out of Hickley, and I haven't seen it. I don't know. I'm sure it's going to allow you to put a number in and get a calculator, but that's half the story. The more important part of the story is with an action, what's the risk? That's what makes people make decisions. And comparing one initiative to another initiative, it's not just seeing what you're doing. It's seeing what, if you don't do anything, what's the potential. So what we did in here is we looked at, and what we did is we took different policies that are happening in Ontario. So like the Green Energy Act. Well, the Green Energy Act, as a municipality, it does nothing to, like you guys have no control over that. That's the grid that's changing where it's getting its electricity from. But it's something that affects you. So it needs to be part of your analysis. Look at something like even like emission standards for vehicles. Emission standards for vehicles are going to change very soon. And it does. You guys have no control over that, but it has a big impact on your greenhouse gas emissions. That needs to be part of the analysis to understand how that policy affects your municipality. But not only that, now you have decisions to make, right? You're competing against one decision over another. Should I be, doing the bike pass to get this many more people on bicycles? Should I be putting in buses because I'll get this many people on? Well, what's the GHG side of it? How does that look? What's the impact if you don't do it one way or another? If oil prices go up, where's the effect? What's the real risk that you guys are dealing with? And that's how you make decisions.
And that's really the core.
At the end of the day, that's the step that needs to happen. That's a great question. Yeah.
And are we